Hi and welcome to the third tutorial for the Iris Pro Training Series PC-9A. In this tutorial we're going to look at taxiing, lining up and taking off in the PC-9A. It might seem that these are fairly straightforward, but some people do have problems with just the basics of what to do, how to do it, what order to do it, things like that. So we're going to take a quick look at all that stuff. A big one to note for people who are not aware of it is that no matter which edition of the PC-9 you have installed, you have a set of checklists which you can quickly and easily pull up. These are located in the Iris Flight Simulation software folder under either the Pro Training Series PC-9A for FSX or the Pro Training Series Pilatus PC-9A for Prepared 3D 2.0. Either system has the same items. Generally, it's a good idea to have the pilot's checklist as displayed here handy, because this will run you through any of the checks you actually require, both pre-flight, engine startup, before taxi, before takeoff, after takeoff, landing, etc. For this tutorial we're going to presume that you have actually done a full standard startup procedure and you're stabilised and ready to go. So we're going to be skipping down to the taxi checks just here. If we have a look, you'll notice that we've got a number of items that we need to go through. 1, parking brake to off. 2, brake functionality check. 3, our nose wheel steering to on and check that our steering is actually working properly. And then 4, our flight instrument functioning test. We're going to go through all of these 4 items before we actually move down to the pre-takeoff or vital actions. So let's get on with it. As you can see, we're currently sitting at Pierce, Western Australia. It's fairly early in the morning. We have our park brake on. Our system otherwise is generally normal. We do however need to turn on, in my case, my strobe lights and my navigation lights. So I'm going to do that before continuing. So now my strobe lights and my navigation lights are on. I'm also going to flick on my landing light. If we remember the first item on our checklist, it was the parking brake to the off position. So our parking brake's off and we're just going to ease the throttle up just a little bit here until we start moving. Then we're going to put in our toe brakes and make certain that the brakes bring us to a stop. The reason for this is to make certain that our brakes are actually functioning. The last thing we want to do is to start taxiing and not have any brakes. And if you're using the advanced edition of the PC-9, it's a very real and distinct possibility that that can happen. So now that we've done our brake check, we need to turn on our nose wheel steering. It's a little documented fact, though it is mentioned in the advanced manual, that you can turn the nose wheel steering on in the Iris Pro Training Series PC-9 by pressing and holding down Control, Shift and then hitting the N key. As you can see, the wheel steer has lit up. What this means is we now have full travel on our forward nose wheel. If we didn't do this, we'd be limited to about 50%, or what most people would call a low gain setting. We'll take a look at this for a moment by moving to the external view. So here we are in the external view. If I give the aircraft a little bit of thrust forward and turn the steering wheel, you'll notice that we're getting a decent amount of travel, though because we're slow we don't really notice it. However, if I stop the aircraft again and turn off the nose wheel steering, and now do the same again, you'll notice that we've got far less travel on our nose wheel steering. So we want to make certain that's on. And of course we've done our steering function check because we know that we can move in both directions. A quirk of Flight Simulator means that you actually do need to be moving forwards to do your nose wheel steering check. Finally, we need to do an instrument check. There's only a small number of instruments you can actually check on the ground, but they're fairly important. One is making certain that your HSI down here is actually updating as you're moving. Another is to make certain that your slide indicator ball is moving to the left and the right. Now, a friend of mine likes to call this ball to the left, ball to the right. It's a nice way of remembering. Of course, radio checks is also another one. In this case, we want to tune 11830. Normally you'd probably already have this tuned because you'd be talking with ATC, so you'd be fairly certain that the radio's working. And of course we want to make certain that all our instruments for our engine monitoring are working properly as well. At the moment everything appears to be running properly. We'll check the other instruments as we start moving. So we're going to keep our speed relatively slow. Start moving forwards. We can see that the ball is moving. Our HSI is changing and indicating where and how we want to move. And our engine and other instruments all appear to be working as they should. So we're going to start our taxiing down to the runway. To do this, we want to keep ourselves mainly set on the taxi guideway line. If we're running a formation, however, we would not be actually moving down the centre of the taxiway. Instead, we'd be in a staggered taxi formation where the lead is on one side of the taxi line, the aircraft behind him is on the other, and the one behind that is on the next, and so on and so forth. I'll show you an example of it. So here we would be roughly where we'd be if we were taxiing in a formation. This way, if my wingman had any problems with his brakes or the like, he's not immediately a threat to me. He's not going to ram me or anything like that. The other item that we want to be very aware of while we are taxiing is of course our speed. Generally you don't want to build up anywhere over about 10 knots or so. And you never want to turn while going too fast. It's a nice and easy way of causing an accident. Now you may be wondering why I've stopped. If we look in front of us, we've got runway 5 and 23, and we've got the hold short markers here. No matter what you do, you always need to hold short at these markers and check and make certain that there is no inbound traffic. If you have ATC on, be it by Vox ATC or perhaps VATSIM with a real controller, or even Pilot Edge or something like that, then normally you'll be told to taxi via a set of taxiways which are all lettered and the like. In this case we're on A2, and hold short of runway 23. That's what we'd be doing here, at which point we'd either let ATC know that we're holding short, or we'd wait for permission to cross the runway. You never enter a runway without permission, ever. It's a good way of causing an accident. For today's purpose, we're going to pretend that ATC has just given us permission to cross runway 23, because we're heading down for runway 18 left. As we taxi across, we still want to keep a scan out, just making certain that there is no traffic that maybe ATC is not aware of. Because you've got to remember, while ATC is there to guide you, they are not the person in charge of your aircraft. You're in charge of your aircraft, and you are responsible for what happens to it. In the real world, it may not just be your life and your aircraft on the line either. Here we are, slowly approaching runway 18 left. We're actually going to move to the operational run-up area, the ORP, just over here, before we slip out and onto the runway itself. This will let us do our pre-takeoff vital actions and run through that checklist. You could do them while taxiing, or you can even do them once you reach here. But most military pilots will either do them as they line up at the hold short point or over at the ORP. And the ORP is especially used if you are flying form. It's a good way of letting everybody get together, get their aircraft all up to the same point, at which point you can make certain that everybody's ready to go. So, here we are at the ORP. I'm going to put the park brake on for a moment, and we're going to run through the pre-takeoff vital actions. So here we're going to sit and have a quick look at it. The first one on it is that our canopy is closed, locked, and the light is out. So if we take a look, you'll see that the canopy is closed and locked, and the light is definitely out. We don't have a two-pilot crew, but if we did, we'd get the rear pilot to check us. Of course, with our aircraft, sadly, you can't do that. The air brake is in. We don't have an air brake indicating light. We need to set our takeoff flaps. So we're going to set takeoff flaps and check that they're indicating. Our probes, we want our probe heat on and indicating that it is on. So probes are on and we have the indicator. Our trims, we want them set, in this case, we want to give ourselves a little bit of trim on the rudder. I'm going to give a notch or two of nose up. I'd rather be a little nose heavy than not. We're going to check our instruments, make certain there are no flags showing. So looking here, we have no flags, no inops, everything appears to be working properly. Our engine instruments are all within their green arcs. We can see that by having a look over here. Our volts and amps are good and we have a good charge. Our hydraulics are in the good area, and our digital quality on our fuel agrees with our fuel balance, and the flow is good. We have no central warning system, red or amber warnings. Our oxygen contents are checked. Our supply is on, and normal. Finally, our controls are free and clear. We can skip the stuff about being strapped in, but we do want to put our seat pin over, like I just did. So, with that all done, we're ready for our line-up checks. So, our landing light is on. Our clock, sadly it doesn't work in the PC-9. So I actually have one on my keyboard which I use. but you can use your watch or anything else. So I'm just going to bring up my stopwatch here and make certain that it's started. So it's started and ticking. My transponder is as required. For this case 1200 is good enough. It's a VFR transponder code. Strobe and beacon lights, well, we know they're good, but we look down and just double check. And our AHRS is good. If it wasn't, we can tap the AHRS fast direct and get it to align for us. So now we're going to go and line up, and then we're going to have a quick look at this takeoff checklist before we actually carry it out. So, here we are, lined up on the centre line of runway 18 left. We're going to take a quick look, before we do anything, at that takeoff checklist. So, the events that are going to happen here are going to happen fairly quickly. We're going to release our brakes, bring our PCL to max, check that everything is correct on our engine system display panel, and at 80 knots we're going to rotate. At that point we'll start to rise into the air. Once we're airborne, we're going to bring the landing gear up, the flaps up, make certain that our air brake remains in, and then check by the time we hit 150 knots indicated airspeed that our landing gear lights are out, our flaps are up, and the air brake is in. The reason we need to do these fairly quickly once we're taken off is, as the checklist warns us, airspeeds above 130 knots, the landing gear may not fully retract, so we really need to be aware of it. What I normally do to make certain that I'm going to hit the right speeds, so just set the speed bug to 130. This lets me know that by the time my indicated airspeeds hits this mark, I need to be through everything on my takeoff checklist and after takeoff checklist. So let's get to it, shall we? There's the 80 knots, rotate, gear up, flaps up. And we have gear up, flaps up by 150 knots. At this point, we continue our climb out while maintaining runway heading. For Pierce, we're going to climb up to about 1,200 feet. That's roughly pattern altitude. We're going to level off here. Now we're going to pause. That's the end of this tutorial. Tutorial 4 will continue on from this point, and in it we'll look at just flying a standard military circuit, as well as how a military circuit differs from a civilian circuit. Thank you for watching the tutorial. My name's Rob, I'll see you in the next one.